Hi, I'm Evgeni. We'll be talking about dialogues today. There will be lots of text, and this accent ain't easy on ears either, so let's get this over with. I've been working with dialogues for about 8 to 9 years. In fact, like my writing career started when my first employer just asked me to write a couple of lines on account that I just spoke English, and afterwards my programmer career died then and there. And later on every endeavors, I still was writing dialogues, even though that was not exactly in the description or something like that. I've been writing dialogue for social games. I've been writing dialogue when I was working as a producer, but mostly just to have some fun and to alleviate the stress. And as a freelancer, I've used dialogue as a tool for basically like every job. How to deliver the story in a story-driven CCG? Dialogues. Tutorial in a plug-incorporated ripoff? Dialogues. Rhythm game? Again, dialogues. Slasher? Dialogues. Monster Prom is mostly the dialogues, and I think the only point how I got this little gig was due to the dialogues. And of course, my latest release, The Long Reach, where it's a point of personal pride that I managed to do a 10-minute long dialogue scene that players really engaged with. But it has never been a problem for me, like the dialogues and talking about dialogues in general. I just wrote them and enjoyed myself, and people seemed to like that. However, when I started teaching game writing in English for non-native speakers, it became a problem. What? Yeah, it's not pixelated usually. Doesn't matter. But it wasn't, because I had to explain how the dialogue works, I had to teach it, I had to provide feedback, I had to gauge the quality of a dialogue, and sadly that's a bit of a problem. It doesn't help either that narrative design in general is sort of like engineering a building where every brick is a literal cat. And it doesn't help that dialogues itself are dirty and ostracized. Well, it's true. Like dramatically speaking, they are the least effective tool for every task that you can find. But what they have for them is that they are very, very cheap to produce, unless we're talking about voiceover, but that's a whole different beast. But the problem with that is that it's usually just not even a choice. It's just we use dialogues because they are there. In my opinion, the baseline for this regard should be skipped a little. The baseline should be just basically journey. It's not the creative choice to remove all the dialogue. The creative choice is every dialogue that you are adding on top of the blank slate. In this regard, it does become a design problem, and you are thinking about it as a creative choice. To provide an example from the movie industry in general, there is a concept of Dutch angle, which is basically the camera just going a little bit askew. It's used to provide this surreal sense of wrong and uncanny, and it works wonders when it's used properly. In the same movie, The Third Man, this is the first shot of how we are meeting the concierge in a building where murder happened. And he didn't say any words, but he already looks untrustworthy, even though we have no reason to believe that except for the image. And plus, the image really looks cool. However, there is this piece of shit. And this whole movie is made from 95% of the movie are done from the Dutch angle. For no apparent reason. They've provided some excuses, but none of them make sense. And basically, it was just the same way that we use dialogue. They are there, so let's use it. And of course, by all means, this movie has so many problems. Dutch angle is one of the least of those. And I don't want to like leave a feeling that dialogues are the most important part ever. So there'll be a pattern. So Ni no Kuni 2 dialogue is not particularly enjoyable, and I've skipped them into oblivion when I was playing that. However, the game carried away with their gorgeous art that you can't see at all, and with the gameplay mechanic, and I actually enjoyed combat. So by all means, mediocre dialogue has all the rights to live, but this is not why we are here. And there are already plenty of literature that are talking about how to do dialogues. The latest one that I really love is Joseph Humphrey's talk about how to represent dialogue in UX, well, in general lines whatsoever, which is extremely useful and extremely helpful. It really does help you understand how to actually construct the line and how to position it and how to drive focus and pacing through the length of the line and so on. There is, of course, the book by Robert McKee, Dialogue, which talks a lot about both theater dialogue, narratized dialogue in movies, in literature, and so on. Naturally, they don't touch video games, but it's still extremely useful whenever you are trying to work on a dialogue. By all means, do give it a try. It's really fucking helpful. But they're all talking only about what's the how to write a good line, how to write a good sequence, and this becomes a bit of a problem because mostly at the end they all fall back to either you have an ear for dialogue or you don't, and you can't build a pipeline on talent. It just doesn't work. It just falls into this black box that you can't understand. And as such, we don't have a conversation or can't have a conversation or a discussion about the topic. And sort of what I mean is like, what I'm looking for is like that core. Like for a chair, it can be ornate as hell. It can have a fantastic amount of legs, fantastic back, but if it's uncomfortable to sit on, it's a horrible chair. And this sittability is like the core and the essence of what the chair is. And this is what I'm trying to find for the dialogues, and hopefully I can provide. But let's try to prove that. So this dialogue is fine. It's nothing special. There is characterization on the left side, on the right side. They provide the information and they do everything that they're supposed to do. However, if you remove the animation, it becomes super unreadable, and the wording might be a little bit long for this regard. But just to have fun with it, let's just switch to some robots or whatnot, delivering the same beat. Again, same stuff, basically. Just the wording has changed and some characterization, so on. In fact, we can remove it whatsoever and remove animation and just have this. And in my opinion, this is a much better dialogue on account like you just can glance on it and see it immediately. But if we take all the bits and just represent them with like nouns or something, we'll just see that it's exchange of information, or basically it's all exposition or demanding exposition, which is exposition by itself. And usually learning that everything that you have ever done is exposition is horrible news. However, in this regard, we can simplify one of the problems and just talk about to start from the point that we know, because since forever writers have tried to work out how to deliver exposition to people so they actually read or consume this exposition. So let's talk about that. There is bad exposition, naturally, like the midichlorian scene that nobody even remembers, and the only time it brings up, even with hardcore Star Wars fans, is usually when they're trying to say how horrible the prequels are. And they truly do. Like this particular scene, it delivers the exposition that nobody wants to hear. Characters don't want to say it, and in general it's super bad. However, to be fair to prequels, they also have the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, which technically on paper sounds even more horrible. It's just a story that has nothing to do with anything. But there is a little trick. Palpatine says it to Anakin not because he wants to tell him a story or educate him. He's seducing him to the dark side, finally. And that's why this dialogue worked and why Darth Plagueis the Wise became mimified. And this is a general pattern. Like you either want to do a revelation or you want to do more than one thing with exposition. Like for example, this one changes the mood entirely. It provides you, spoilers, by the way. It provides you more information about the current situation. It's not the Freys who organized the coup, it's the Lannisters, and basically the North is fucked from that point. Then it might change your perspective in some point. I did it. My favorite speech, my favorite villain line. I did it 35 minutes ago. It doesn't provide new information. It provides new perspective through which you evaluate everything else. And in general, if you do exposition that does two things, well, it's general in writing, in game design, in whatever. A feature that does more than one thing is way better than anything else. And you can hide exposition by this principle in jokes. You can hide it in running gags. And my favorite trick, which we'll be talking a lot, is you can hide exposition in exposition. Tarantino is pretty famous for this particular part. By his own admission, how he explained it, he hides the crucial exposition that the viewer actually needs in completely useless minutia trivia about Big Macs or whatnot. And we eat this exposition up. We eat the exposition that we need. And actually, the crown jewel of dialogue writing, the French farm scene, try to give it another watch and see what Hans Landa actually is saying. Everything is just a statement of information. However, by using that, he creates one of the most tense and suspenseful scene ever, just by delivering lots of exposition. And we eat it up. And so that's We are brushed up on exposition, so let's try another angle and let's try to talk with regard to character, since because characters are in general why we do the dialogues. We want to show how the real characters. We want to show how there are conflicts and so on. This is what why we are writing the dialogues inherently about. But so let's get into their heads real quick. The stuff that I usually do when I'm writing, figuring out what actions the characters do, is I use several stolen systems. So the first one is the values, which was taught to me by my screenwriting teacher like 7 years ago. I think she took it either from another screenwriting teacher or from psychology. It started in psychology, technically. It's basically infinite goals that you have that drive your whole existence. You can never satisfy those, but you will try consciously or subconsciously achieve them in some way. And psychology says that there are 5 to 6, and depending on the complexity of the character, you can go for whatever helps you. But in general, you can do a lot of this with just these simple values. A lot like take the pleasure out of it and you get Hitler. Then, of course, we don't follow the values blindly. There is also shadow, which, welcome to the Jungian part of the story, that usually are a source of inner conflict. Like, for example, for Frollo, clearly virtue is a very dominant value, but when he sees Esmeralda and he lusts for her, already a horrible creature is driven to a truly heinous acts of ethnic cleansing and burning Paris. But values don't tell us what exactly people will do in any given moment, and we still need that. So let's go to interests. And interests is the stuff that I stole from this soul talk from TED, from Simon Sinek. And the interests in this particular regard are just finite goals and manifestations of those values, like that characters are trying to achieve. These are finite. You can get done with them at some point. Like I don't know, like one thing is finishing this talk, the other one is just getting to as much talks as I can. But again, there is still a black box, again, between values and interests, the principle at which they work. And now we are getting back to the game industry, finally. And these are resources. I stole it from the talk by Alexis Kennedy from Kiev, but it was not recorded, so you only get with this poorly recorded talk. But the idea is, in general, that resources are I cannibalized the idea. Like Alexis Kennedy is more precise in many ways, and he's just explaining how in Cultist Simulator and Sunless Sea they're using dread, health, and other resources as a narrative device to inform the player about what's happening and what's going on. But for me, it's just basically everything that is not value or interest is a resource. It might be a story that you've heard just last week. It might be just that you are super drunk and have a massive hangover. It might be literally everything that is just not a value or a resource, some information or whatnot. And with this, we can start building. We could technically do the taxonomy or whatnot of these resources, but I don't see why bother. Just pick whatever works for your story and be consistent with that. And the system, as such, becomes like this. Through our values, we evaluate the resources and build the interests according to the resources we have. For example, our health is really low, and one of our values is self-preservation. As such, we will try to go to the doctor. However, if you add to that another value of, for example, greed, avarice, or something like that, then suddenly you check the health against the money that you have. And if you don't have enough money, maybe you will not go to the doctor. It might sound stupid, but this is literally Breaking Bad, inciting incident. So, but these are all just actions, and we are here talking about lines. Oh my God, it's so slow. This is even more painful to watch. Yeah, let's try just some lines and hope that it will work. So the first one, let's try just talking like the action to the action of firing somebody. We can do it in the most simplest possible way. But think about what values and resources the person who said this have. Probably they have a lot of experience, they just don't care anymore, they're desensitized or something like that, and that's why they use this phrase. Maybe they're also talking to a pair that is controlling an orange buffoon, but... and there's another variation. Shit. Guys? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the other version, we have to let you go. There is the implication that it's not somebody's decision. The control as a resource is quite low. Maybe there is a little confidence, and we are not, or like the character can't take the blame for this particular decision. Well, there are plenty of variations, again, that can be described and tracked back to values and resources. Let's try another one. I don't remember which one. Oh, yeah. So again, this one is basically just ripping the band-aid off. There is no love involved anymore. The person just wants to get done with it. Otherwise, it might be a person who values truthful and straightforwardness first and foremost, and there is still love there. Again, there are plenty of ways. Compare it to 3 times. So with I'm seeing someone else, this one invites the conversation. This is probably the person wants to keep the relationship that they have. The resources, there is some love left or just some respect that they're trying to figure out. Or to get into a more fucked up situation, he might, particular person might invite the dumpee in this situation to talk him out of it, which is really screwed up, but good, nice conflict. More good news. This is just a statement of fact. There is no happiness involved whatsoever. Compare it to the celebration, that is the phrase "we are having a baby." Both of them are cliché. However, you can trace them back to whatever situation they have, whatever values and resources. Like the bottom one has a family, has some future and hope, and the first one is literally just stating medical condition. And of course, seductions are fun. So a normal, nice person, when that person has a goal of basically sex, they will try to just be nice and respectful and try an open-ended phrase. But if we take the intelligence and drive it to 0, and if we add a little fuckload of confidence, we get this. But again, this is just the lines. Let's try with some like actual proper dialogue. Back to our 5 things. This is boring. This is boring as hell. We are still technically doing the resource thing and value thing. However, it doesn't really work. It's just one argument repeated over and over without any differentiation. And since writing is basically just mixing stuff up and using the same thing, let's try to add more arguments, but not to this particular conversation because I couldn't come up with a better way. These are different arguments, technically. However, the angle of attack and the tactic is exactly the same. And this is basically the beginning of every Toy Story movie, actually. But people don't tell it like this. If we see that one approach doesn't work, we try to switch the tactic. We try to approach it from another way and try to achieve our interests, but without a situation. We see that something doesn't work, and we will switch it up. So let's go back to the flat earthers and try to do that. This is using a lot of resources already. It's different arguments and different tactics. Like the person on the left is speaking some information, some facts that he has. We can see like the resources might be that there are pictures from space. It's just the guy is scientific at some point, and this is his first go-to stuff. But then they also know about ancient scientists, and this is also resource and education or whatnot. But on the right side, we can see that resources are changing by how emotional the person is. On the third line, they don't have any arguments anymore, and the anger and frustration just rises up, and they're just trying to yell at anybody in submission. But again, with this changing of tactics, you still have to be careful. So this doesn't really work on account this is just way all over the place. Half of these arguments are not foreshadowed properly. It would have worked if, for example, we would see the 2 men on the screen actually talking about, but you still have to be mindful. But again, this is just like small 5-line examples. Let's try to apply every dramatic situation and to an actual, like something of an actual game, and get it to 11. So imagine a situation where you have to show the player or a viewer that they have 2 potential companions. And we need to show them who the companions are, what they can do, and what they are about. This is the exposition part of the conflict, just basically the beginning. And we already have a conflict incited in this situation. We get the attention of a reader, of a player, and we do give the guy some breadcrumbs for the person. But we already see a lot of information in foreshadow in this particular conversation. We see that they are basically a couple, and there is something wrong with their arguments. But let's go to development. Now we deliver the exposition that was required by the game. We know that one of them is a hitman that is completely desensitized about her profession, and the other one is a driver that still has a heart or a soul. And now we have all the information that we want to do, and we still provide it in an entertaining way. The only thing that we have to do is just wrap up. So this is just basically wrapping up the whole stuff and just finishing the dialogue in some way, plus providing a way out so that sort of for the player, he doesn't get them both as a whole package. You just you can pick and choose from those guys. And like if you do get, for example, two companions of this, it will be a nice, interesting situation that the player probably would like to observe. And think about the other resource of frustration. The whole situation didn't start as a breakup. It started just as a conversation about pregnancy. I have no idea why, by the way, pregnancy is a pattern in this talk. Doesn't matter. I probably don't need to open that door. But in the end, it's just the frustration and anger take away the control of the person on the right, and they break up. It was not the intention initially. There was no indication whether they are happy or not. And this is basically what, in my opinion, what the dialogues are. They are just two systems that are exchanging exposition according to resources to change the resources for another person, according to the goals that they have. And this is a very simplified version. However, you can do a lot with simple situations. And plus, it also looks very suspiciously like basically picking a weapon in Doom, picking a resource. And from this framework, we can talk about dialogues as not like writing, but more from the part of designing a puzzle, designing a combat chess between people. Think about like what you're. Oh, so bad. Think about what Doom is in a nutshell. You have a goal to kill all the demons. You have the tools to do that, and for any given situation, you assess the resource of the room, the information. You choose the appropriate weapon. You think about how many resources you have, and then you execute it. That's what the people do. That's what the characters do. And again, if the tactic doesn't work, you can switch up to another weapon. And this, again, is dialogue in a nutshell. And we can sort of use the same framework for different situations in Doom, like basically the changing of the information status, for example. Oh my God, these are painfully looking GIFs. They used to work normally. Yeah, we'll just go over it. This is painful. You can also treat resources as basically in a level design. Like you get some bit of information on the level that you can then use in a dialogue, either as a player or as a character. And then it's properly foreshadowed into something that the player can see, and they go, aha, this is something that I know about. You can use it as a wind-up for telegraphing and foreshadowing. And then from this framework, what I like most about it is that we can explain monologuing. Like there actually can be a reason for that. Basically, the logic behind chainsaw is it's scarce resource. You can use it. You can use it rarely. The animation is quite long, but it's super nice and crunchy for Doom standards. And it gives you a lot of rewards. This is basically what monologue is supposed to be: scarcely done, with rare resources obtained and withheld, and with a real nice reward, informational reward that players or characters can act upon. And of course, I couldn't resist. But yeah, this becomes an actual dialogue design. And now it's a proper framework through which we can have conversation about and actually do like pinpoint precisely to that black box that was just here for the dialogue. So just again to reiterate the stuff. Another situation, another example, we have just finished a quest and we need to get our reward. Again, the quest completion is only in the 4th line. I cleaned your kitchen, and but we're providing, again, same exposition, everything that we need to do, and we provide the actual reward, more information about that person. Like probably she might be scary. It might be scary for the person on the right to give out the number of said she, or she is just this particular person. Something does not allow her to give out the phone even after she promised that, and this creates mystery in the same dialogue that we can go forth, and it satisfies their reasoning. And this has been done a lot. Like this is nothing new. I have no idea, conscious or subconscious or whatnot, but Deus Ex people have been doing that with their social gameplay, and it's basically the stuff that I have just told. It's trying to make one bar go high or go low with the phrases that you are using according to the information that you have, and again some drama pitched in naturally. And there is also example of all walls must fall that has a dialogue mini game. And it's literally the stuff that I have just told you. You pick up some random lines that make the bars on the left go either up or low. And in this particular situation, you need to flirt your way in so that the person gives you a password for the VIP room. You just raise the flirty bar, and the person trusts you, the resource is gained, and you gain the password. And that's it. They don't have a lot of stakes in these dialogues. You can always just shoot your way in or whatnot. But it is still a nice mini-game or a nice puzzle of a dialogue. And you can do some more interesting things, again, if you're picking out as a design. Red Strings Club used the alcohol mixing, basically bartending and cocktails to change the emotional level and emotional status of the other person, and they change the dialogues accordingly with their resources. But I've been talking mostly about from the linear perspective. But the whole idea for that is that it's basically universal. You can the core, the values are from psychology, and as such, you can apply them to the player. Just think what dominant values the player has, and design the interactivity accordingly, or not interactivity. Like, do they want to if they want to play Crusader Kings, they would probably want to achieve the fantasy of manipulation or whatnot. If they're playing Doom, they just want fast, skillful gameplay and to be like the most baddest creature on Earth. This can all be represented with values, and you already know the resources the character has because you control their every decision. And you can do it with small things like role-playing, wherein basically you can have several choices. Like, think about how many ways there are to choose the beer and in what situation you will use them. Maybe the character doesn't want any conversation, they will just go beer. Maybe they have as a resource, they are nicely educated and well-mannered, and they would say please. Maybe they are not confident enough about the situation. Maybe the bar looks shady and they don't want to, maybe they're afraid the bar brawl will start, so they will just phrase it as a question. Maybe they want to talk with the bartender, and they will try to sneak in the order in the conversation. And you can do it with actions, using the same system, figuring out what the values are, what resources they have. Like, if we're approaching McCree in a bar, maybe we want to be a flirty person, maybe we want to be a funny person, maybe we want to be a that person, or maybe we just straight up want to start a fight. Another good idea about how to look at this from the player's perspective and how to form the dialogue is by thinking about animation. Animation in general is the closest thing to writing in video games, since both ours and theirs is exercise in time. And we can think about it in that way. This particular talk describes how they convey character, and this is how they convey character through first-person animation, and the dialogue characterization part is mostly that. So just for this part, just think about reloading as sort of taking a breather, like I'll get back to you, give me a minute or something like that. And think about why people, if they're not using min-maxing or just approaching the Overwatch as normal human beings, they would pick a character that suits them, that is more interesting and more fun, the values that they're having, and as such we just provide the same dialogue that reinforces those values. It's nice, well-educated person that is trying to be polite about the situation. Compare it to, they don't give a shit whatsoever. And again, it might be the player that doesn't care about dialogues. Again, we should cater to them too. And the people who want to play a fantasy of a soldier, and just think about how the soldier actually talks, and they will try to maximize the amount of information in the least possible amount of time. So this framework is basically super simple and can be used for every dialogue, every action that you can do. Like you just take the stimuli, like for example, can you help our village? Some question or some situation. You run it through the values of the character. You run it through values, the resources, and you form the interests accordingly. From those interests, you take the exposition, the resources that are most useful to you, and then you do them as an exposition. And that is basically the system. And it just delivers the dialogue. And that's my talk. Thank you so much. You know what to do. I hope it made sense.
Good. So it's a section for Q&A. So if we have any questions to Evgeni, just raise your hand.
There's always this moment, like in the beginning, nobody wants to raise a hand, but then one hand goes up and it's a torrent. There's one on the balcony.
Okay.
So the question is how important the dialogue is for the story? If it doesn't, the easiest version is just doesn't work. Think about this scene, like does it do anything, this particular dialogue that you are writing? Does it deliver the exposition that you need for the story? Does it changes the story somehow? Does it do something except for just dialogue? If it's not, you can cut it safely. If it does work or do something, then probably it has a place in your game. But you're thinking just for the purpose of this particular scene, what it exactly does. If it doesn't do anything, it should be cut, period. But if it does something, then you can work with it, yes. Nope. I think that's it then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evgeni Puzankov.
Thank you so much.